Hi, welcome to RaceTech. My name is Joe, and behind me is a 1991 Spec Miata. And what's great about the Spec Miata is you can get them on the track pretty easily. Just get the basic components, cage, safety items, you can get on the track. But to make them fast, then you have to start tinkering with them. And one of the things that makes you fast is making sure that your engine is running right. So how can we do that? Well, this car doesn't have some of the more modern computers that, say, for the 1999s might have, where you can monitor different pieces of the engine performance. So with this one, we need to find out how the engine's running, and how we can do that is with an air-fuel ratio meter and a fuel pressure gauge. So adding those two items to this car will help us understand a little bit how the engine's running, and we can actually tune it. So what we're going to be installing is a AEM X series gauge, which is a wideband oxygen sensor. It's much more sensitive than some other types of air-fuel ratio gauges, and then an autometer fuel pressure gauge. So we'll talk to you a little bit how we install it. These are things you can do yourself. The air fuel gauge does require a bit of welding, but if you do have a welder, you can do it yourself. It's not that hard. Just be careful, take your time, or you can just set it up, get it where you want it, and take it to a shop and they can work pretty quick. So let's show you what we have to do. So one of the first things you have to do is install the gauge. So the biggest problem in a Miata is that there's not too many places to mount things. So in this car, what we have is a oil pressure, water temperature, voltage meter, some data acquisition type information. This is really just a tack, some warning lights. What we have here in our car is we have a oil pressure light, a water temperature light. We also have a water pressure light. And the big thing about that is if you lose all your water, you might not get a temperature reading. So we want to make sure we always have water pressure. So we run with a water pressure warning light as well. So with this, there's not too many places to install these gauges. So I made a little mount here real quick, and just out of aluminum, screwed it in. I have a lap timer here, fuel pressure, airflow ratio meter. And these are pretty simple to wire up. They come in a loom. Basically, you just need power and a ground and hook it up. So what we need to do is we need to install this oxygen sensor into the exhaust system, and it needs to go into about between 15 and 20 inches down the exhaust from the exhaust port. So on a turbocharged engine, they want it a little farther, but this is a normally aspirated engine, so we just have to figure out where that is. So what I did was I just got a piece of string, I cut it to about 18 inches, and I just kind of zip tied it here on the exhaust port, just to give you a rough idea. And I'm running it down all the ways down the pipe, and where it ends, I'm just going to give it a little mark with some with a Sharpie, and then I'll know about where my sensor needs to be welded in. Okay, so I've got my pipe out of the car, and now we're ready to put this fitting for the oxygen sensor into the pipe. I'm going to put it in with this hole cutter bit. If you notice, there's a fitting right here, and the reason why I'm not using that is that's for dyno tuning the car. So I want to make sure that I leave that port open, so when we do dyno tune it, we'll have that available. Also, we can calibrate the AER gauge to our dyno results, and that's a great feature of that gauge. The other thing is that this fitting is going to be permanently into the car, and we don't want it to get clogged up with any fluids and things like when we start up. So when you install this, it has to be at least 10 degrees north of horizontal in the car. So we have to put it in this range. So this is actually totally 90 degrees vertical in the car. So we're going to weld it right here. This is your transmission tunnel, and your transmission's right about here. So this is vertical in the car. Let's get that cut out. Okay, so I've got this drilled out and cleaned it up with a grinder, and I've got my fitting, set it in there, it's all ready to go. I'm just going to put a bead of weld on there, get it all set up. We'll get this pipe back in the car and button the whole thing up. So we've got everything installed on the car. Over here I've got the O2 sensor wires all hooked up that goes down to our exhaust, And over here I've got the fuel pressure sensor set up on the car. I actually installed this on the pressure side line in this early Miata. That's the rear line that goes to the front of the rail, and then the fuel pressure regulator is on the rear, and that goes to the front line that returns back to the tank. So the way I had this installed is that I could monitor that the pressure coming off the pump is consistent. And so that's what I want to know right now in the car. Later we can add an external pressure regulator and then install a pressure gauge directly on that, and we'll know exactly how we're adjusting up or down the pressure in the car. So let's see what it looks like in the car. Okay, so we have everything installed, and this is what we look like. Give it a start up. Got our fuel pressure off the pump. Got our air-fuel ratio meter. And we're almost ready for the track. So I hope this is helpful to someone, and look forward to serving up some additional videos and look for us at the track. Thanks.